All right, let's dive into a really big one today, a massive what if that gets to the very heart of who we are. We're going to try and imagine a world where we could just hit delete on religion. What would that world look like? And what would it tell us about ourselves?
This isn't as simple as just getting rid of churches and temples. It's like trying to pull a single specific thread out of the entire tapestry of human history. I mean, what would we even be like if we'd figured out a moral code but never felt that pull towards something sacred, something bigger than ourselves?
To even start, we have to get our heads around this one key idea. Religion isn't just some optional piece of software we installed along the way. All the evidence suggests its roots are kind of hardwired into us, into the very architecture of how our brains evolved to see the world.
Okay, so it all seems to start with this wild concept from cognitive science. It's called hyperactive agency detection. Basically, our ancestors' brains were wired for survival, right? So when you hear a rustle in the grass, it's way safer to assume it's a predator and be wrong than to assume it's just the wind and become deader. Well, that same survival instinct didn't just see predators. Over time, it started seeing intention and meaning everywhere, looking for forces behind the curtain of reality. And from there, it's not a huge leap to the divine.
So once you have that cognitive wiring in place, you can start to see how religion took on its first major role in our story. It became this incredible social glue that held our earliest societies together. These shared beliefs, these myths, they weren't just comforting campfire stories. No, they were incredibly powerful tools for organizing people. Think about it. A tribe that believes its gods or its ancestors are always watching is going to behave very differently. It creates a sense of accountability that literally goes beyond the grave. And that idea that there's a supernatural eye in the sky, well, that was the key to building trust and getting people to cooperate on a scale that had never, ever been seen before.
And you can really see the stark difference this makes when you lay it out. Without religion, our morality might have just stayed, well, transactional. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Our empathy might have stopped at the edge of our own family or tribe. But religion took these ideas, things like helping others, and it made them sacred. It made them universal virtues. It created this sense of kinship that could stretch across an entire civilization.
But of course, there's a flip side. That same powerful social glue could also harden into cement. It could become rigid, unyielding dogma. And that, well, that's where we get to the much darker side of the story.
The very same certainty that bound communities together was also used to justify absolute horrors against anyone outside of the group. It's the dark reflection of that powerful in-group loyalty, brutal out-group hostility. Holy wars, inquisitions, the persecution of anyone deemed a heretic, it was all fueled by this unshakable conviction that we are right and they are fundamentally wrong. This is the absolutely devastating price humanity has paid for that kind of certainty. So this leads to a really fascinating question, right? If we hadn't been held back by all this dogma, could we have gotten to a better place? Faster? Could we have built a system of ethics based on reason and empathy much, much sooner? Could science and equality have blossomed centuries earlier? But here's the critical counterpoint, and it's a tough one. A world based on pure reason isn't automatically a kinder world. There's this chilling observation that the same cold rationality that can build a telescope can also be used to design a gas chamber. Logic on its own doesn't have a moral compass. Untouched by a sense of the sacred, it risks becoming just a cold, hard calculus of efficiency, not compassion.
Okay, so we've seen the good and the bad when it comes to society, but pulling religion out of the equation goes even deeper. It would completely rewrite our entire culture. It would take away what one source calls our grammar for awe. I just love this line. Think about what that really means. All of our deepest, most overwhelming feelings, wonder, grief, longing, joy, religion gave them a structure. It built a house for them. It gave them a shared language so we could experience them together. And you can see that architecture everywhere. It's in the soaring arches of a cathedral, reaching for the heavens. It's in the divine touch of a Michelangelo fresco. You can hear it in a soul-shaking hymn. All of this incredible, transcendent art came from one fundamental human desire. How do we, in these small, finite bodies, connect with something that feels infinite and eternal? And what about philosophy? Sure, it would exist, but it might be completely different. We would have become absolute masters of asking what things are and how they work. But that giant, all-important question, why, that has always been the domain of theology. Without it, we risk becoming a species that can explain absolutely everything, but finds meaning in absolutely nothing. So let's say we do it. We erase religion. What fills that massive, gaping void, not just in society, but inside of us, in our own psychology? For thousands and thousands of years, religion served this vital psychological role. You could call it the great anesthetic for existential despair. It took the raw terror of death and it reframed it, turning it into a journey, a transition. It took the randomness of suffering and gave it a higher purpose. Without that anesthetic, humanity would have to face its own mortality, raw and unfiltered, in a universe that, frankly, just doesn't seem to care. But here's the thing, that deep, fundamental human need to worship something, it doesn't just disappear. When traditional faith fades, that powerful devotional energy, it just relocates. It has to go somewhere. It finds new idols, new secular gods to cling to. The nation, the ideology, progress, even race. And if you want sobering proof of that, look no further than the 20th century. The century that saw the biggest decline in traditional religious belief was also, by far, the bloodiest in human history, perfecting industrial-scale slaughter in the name of political and nationalist ideologies. Getting rid of God didn't end fanaticism, it just gave it a new flag to wave. So, after all that, where does this leave us? What does this whole thought experiment really show us? Well, it reveals this profound and pretty uncomfortable contradiction that sits right at the very heart of what it means to be human. At the end of the day, it's not a simple balance sheet of good versus bad. In a world without religion, we might have gained more peace, but we might have lost all our poetry. We could have been intellectually freer, but maybe spiritually emptier. We could have built a perfectly rational world that feels utterly, completely meaningless. It's a huge, complicated trade-off with no easy answer. And that's really where we have to leave it, with this final, unsettling thought. That maybe the real question isn't whether the world would be better without religion, it's whether, without it, we would even still be human. Maybe religion, with all of its beauty and all of its horror, isn't something we invented at all. Maybe it's just a mirror, reflecting the deepest, most contradictory parts of our own nature right back at us. Thanks for joining me.